Good evening. Welcome to the RELO AUA webinar series. This month, December, we are having Molly McHarg. She is an international educator and consultant with us. And my name is Trisha Smith-Pierce, and I'll be hosting the webinar. Molly is going to be sharing with us a way to guide students in evaluating their sources. It's really exciting. She has a great way to do it, and I'm excited to hear her share that with us. So if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A box and I'll answer them as we go along, or ask Molly as we go along, or at the end, whichever is appropriate for that. And please make sure to set your comments to all panelists and attendees, and that way everybody can see what you say in the chat box. We're really excited about that. So without further ado, let's have Molly start. Thank you very much. Take it away, Molly.
Okay, thank you, Trisha. Good evening, everyone. I'm excited to be here with you this evening. I'm sorry that I can't see all of you. I'm going to just start by telling you a little bit about myself. So I am an international educator and consultant. I spent 10 years, a whole decade in Doha, Qatar, teaching at some American universities, teaching English and research. I also worked at a number of other institutions in the Middle East. Currently, I hold a number of positions. I am an English language specialist with the U.S. Department of State. I am a global content manager for Stanton Chase, which is an international executive search firm. So I'm a practitioner as well. I do the writing for the firm. And I'm also a classroom teacher. So I work at NIST International School as a substitute teacher, and I taught year 6 for a little while, but I'm working with all grades from kindergarten through high schoolers. If you are interested in learning any more about my background, you can visit the website, which I'll also provide to you at the end of this presentation. So enough about me. I would like to know a little bit about you and who I'm speaking to today. We're going to have a quick poll. So could you please tell me what level do you teach? So you'll press, the first option is primary, secondary, university, or other.
Okay, Molly, we're just waiting for some responses here. We'll let it go for a little while, and then I'll share the results once we end the poll. So far, it looks like we have mostly university.
And if you teach more than one, you're welcome to, I think the poll only lets you choose one, so you can just take your pick, or you can select the other.
Okay, we'll let this go for like 10 more seconds, and then as a few more people the end stragglers are voting. Okay, so I'm going to end the poll now, and I'll share it with everybody so they can see. So it looks like, I don't know if you can see that, Molly, but it looks like that we have about 50% are university, and then the next is primary school. So that's pretty interesting. That's great.
Great.
Okay, I will stop sharing and you can go ahead.
Well, welcome and thank you all for participating. And I'm happy that you are in different levels because I believe this activity can be used for different levels, even though my primary use with it has been in university education. I think especially secondary and primary school, you can use it as well. I have another question for everyone. Why are you participating in this webinar today? So please write your responses in the comment box. And unfortunately, I can't see the comment box, but Trisha is kind enough to relay some of those answers.
Okay, excellent, Molly. As I get some responses in the chat box, I'll give you. So we might have to wait a minute. There always seems to be a delay with this when people are having to respond in the chat box. This happens in every webinar. Well, for my part, I'll just say this. I am excited. I know I'm hosting the webinar, but I am excited to be here because every time I've learned it, I've learned so much. One person says she wanted to support RELO Bangkok and recruited other people to come, which is fantastic. Learn
Great.
new ideas is another one about getting students to learn how to do research. That's great. Because getting good sources is always a challenge for students who are new to researching. So one person has said it's been a while since they've had to do research anything and had issues even adding citations to papers. Some people just regularly attend every session. They just love it so much. I'm hoping that's why. So get new ideas for the class. That's a really positive thing to always have new ideas. That's why that's so important. And one person said their teacher wanted them to do it. It's a very useful topic for all English teachers. That's so true, to learn how to do this. Okay, so do you want to just go ahead? It looks like they've slowed down a little bit.
Great. So I hope I'm able to live up to some of the expectations for this evening. And I hope above all that it is useful for you. I know as a teacher in the classroom, for me, the most important thing is what can I do in the class? How can I teach this? I like the practical more than the theoretical. So I'm hoping that you'll get something out of it today. I have one more question for you before we really delve in. So if you are teaching research, or even if you're a learner, what do you find to be the most difficult aspect of teaching research, or even of conducting and doing research yourself? What do you think is the most difficult thing?
So I'll just add what one person said, the citations and the sources. They said that before, so we can add that. One of the most difficult things is to have them remember everything that they've learned, all the knowledge that they have. And understanding how to even cite or paraphrasing a source is one idea. Knowing how to get information and organize it so you're not, without copying it directly, so you're not, can't think of the word right now.
Plagiarizing.
Plagiarizing, thank you. So you're not plagiarizing. Knowing how to yes. And so that's an important thing, to know how to cite the sources and how to do it. Is how to conduct the research, teaching groups of students the different levels of the experience with doing research, to give them experiences of doing research. That sounds fantastic. Okay, so I think that this has kind of slowed down a little bit. I'll let you go ahead.
Great, thank you. And I do think that those issues of citation, like the nuts and bolts of citation, and issues surrounding plagiarism are definitely critical. I have written some other articles about those, and I'd be interested in doing a different webinar on those specific topics as well. For today, we're really going to talk about sources when you were talking about research. And one thing I'm sure all of us, just as human beings in the current century, in the information age, is this challenge with information overload. So let's say you start on Google and you type in a search term. There's just so much information. And that's without even going to the library and looking at books and magazine articles, but just the sheer depth and availability of so much information. And I like this next quote. If you are familiar with a fire hydrant, when it's turned on and opened up, the water shoots out very, very quickly, and it will knock you over. And so getting information off the internet is like taking a drink from a fire hydrant. I mean, you're just suddenly hit and overwhelmed with information. So today we're going to talk about how let me put it back there for a moment. We're going to talk about how you can help yourself and your students manage this information very specifically with evaluating it. So not just taking the first response or the first search result from Google, but how do you decide if it's like a really good source and it's credible and authoritative, or if it's less so? So I have another poll for all of you. There is something called the CRAP test, C-R-A-P. And I'm just curious if any of you have used the CRAP test to teach research, or even if you're a student to learn about research. So if you've never heard of it, that's totally fine. Just say nope. Maybe it sounds vaguely familiar.
I have to apologize. That poll I did not get put in, but if you will put that in the chat box. Most people, we have no. A bunch of no's are saying they have not heard of it.
And don't worry, if you say yes, I won't call on you to explain it.
It looks like so far no one has heard of it. They have no experience with it. Yes, no from everyone so far. So this is going to be a completely new idea for everyone.
Okay, great.
Thank you for your patience with that.
Thank you. So the first thing I'm going to do is give you a one-slide description of the CRAP test. So this is a very popular method used to determine the credibility of a source. And many teachers will give their students a checklist with the letters C-R-A-P, and they will say, is it current? Okay, what is the currency of this information? How recent is it? The R stands for reliability. So you have to ask yourself, what type of information is provided, and are there additional sources to support the claims made in this piece of writing? The A in the CRAP is authority. So who is the author? Who wrote this piece? And what are his or her credentials? And then the P is the purpose of the writing. So is it fact, opinion? Is it bias? Okay, so thinking about these elements as you look at your sources. I highly recommend, if you're not familiar with this, you may want to Google the CRAP test and find out more, but this is really it in a nutshell. Just saying, does your article, or does your source fulfill all of these criteria? Okay, and so today, what we are going to look at is what I consider an extension or a variation of the CRAP test. So I personally call this a spectrum approach to evaluating sources. So with the CRAP test, it's like I said, like a checklist, okay? Does it have the C, the R, the A, the P? But in this activity that I'm going to present to you tonight, it's more of a spectrum or a line, and I'm going to show that to you now. So the specific activity I've broken down into steps. So step 1, you tell your students to bring in sources. So for example, maybe you're discussing the topic of climate change in the world, and you tell your class, everyone bring in an article or a book or some kind of source about climate change. Okay, so everyone brings something into class. You don't really need to have many other guidelines for the first step. They just bring in something. Step 2, have students complete an arrow. Now, I'm going to show you this specific arrow. Okay, so this is what I make. I print it out, I cut it into an arrow shape, and I hand one a size of a full page to every student in the class. And you will see it has name, so I want the students to write their name on it. Then they write the title of the source. They write the date of publication, the author or authors of the text, information they know about those authors, and then other information they have about that source. So this is fairly basic. It's really just filling in the blanks, okay? And I'm going to show you an example of a completed arrow. So my name is Molly McHarg. I have a source. The title is Gender Equality Around the World. The date of publication was October 6th, 2019. The author of the text is Lauren Hepler. I know that she is a regular writer for the New York Times, so I have added that as information about her. And then other information about this source is that this article comes from the New York Times, which is a reputable and authoritative source. So every student in the class is going to have a different article, a different book, a different website that they are going to use to complete this arrow. It's important because sometimes, for example, a student will have a source from a website, and maybe they cannot find the date of publication, or maybe they cannot find who the author is or anything about that author. So if that's the case, they leave it blank, okay? But it's based on the information that they have. So again, let's pretend I have this, I've completed it. The next step is you are going to show your students the spectrum or the scale. And this is what my scale looks like. Okay, so I call it the spectrum of sources. And on the far left side, I have an arrow that says, it's possible that my 6-year-old brother wrote this. In the middle, I have what says, I believe it, but I need to find out more information before I can reliably trust this source. And then on the far right end, it says, this is likely the most authoritative article available, and I have 100% confidence in this source. So you've shown your students the spectrum, and then you are going to and you've given them the arrow, they've completed it. Next, they're going to take their arrow and decide where to put it on that scale. So right now, I'm going to have you all do this. So let's look again at the source that I gave as the example before. It's called Gender Equality Around the World. It's fairly recent. It was just in October this year. We know it's from a New York Times author, and it comes from the New York Times. So I want you to look at that and think again about the scale that I showed you. Now I have numbered them because you're going to take a poll in a minute. You're going to answer a poll. So 1 is, it's possible that my 6-year-old brother wrote this. And 5 is, this is the best, most authoritative article available. So take a minute and decide, you can answer the poll, where do you think on that spectrum you would place this article? And don't worry, there's no right or wrong.
Okay, Molly, I launched the poll and it looks like we have people actively responding right now. So as soon as they are finished, I will share the results. It's actually very interesting to see how the lines jump up and down. But right now it looks like most people think it's at a 3. We'll give it like 10 more seconds and then for the last few people to respond, and then I'll close the poll and share it with everyone. Okay. Oops. We have a couple more people. Okay, I'm going to end the poll, everyone, and share the results.
Okay, interesting. So we've got the majority at 3, and then everything else fairly scattered.
Okay, excellent. I'll stop sharing the poll now and can go on.
Okay, great. Is there anyone who is willing to be brave and anyone who answered 3, would you be willing to write in the comments box why you chose 3? Or actually anyone who chose any of the numbers, just say what number you chose and why you chose that.
Okay, we'll give people a few minutes to think about this and put it in the chat box. This is, like I said, it's always a little bit of a delay when people have to do this. So I will say I would choose 5 just because I would think, oh, the New York Times is actually really authoritative, but then I have to pause and think, well, maybe it's biased. And so maybe I should have put 4, I don't know. So like I would be maybe 4.5. So one person said the New York Times is usually an authoritative source. It seemed like it satisfied a few of the CRAP requirements, so I picked 4. That's what one person said. Okay, so I don't know if anybody else is going to feel.
Okay, that's fine.
I have one more. I will say this. Some people say that we're kind of like wavering, kind of like I was, and because the New York Times seems generally like a good source.
Okay, good. And one thing I will say is this is a very difficult task over a webinar because I'm not giving you the whole article right now. In the classroom, you would have access to that full article. I demand that students bring in the whole piece. They complete the arrow in class, but they have the whole piece with them. So if there are questions, as we go along with this activity, you will see why that's important. And I think it's good that many of you were saying, well, I don't really know, because I only gave you a little bit of information about that source. I only gave you the information that's on that arrow. You have not read it, you have not seen it. There may be other indicators that it should be on one end or the other end of the scale. So good. We are going to do a little more practice. We're going to look at another source. And to make it a little bit easier, I have not put it in an arrow. Okay, I've put the same information here. So it's a new source. The title is Female Athletes Take a Stand After Transgender Athletes Dominate Track Event. Quote, we're facing the end of women's sports, end quote. This was published on September 29th, 2019, so it's also fairly recent. The author is listed as Cauldron Pool. We don't know any information about the author, but it comes from a website. And so the website, if you look at the very bottom, that link, it is called cauldronpool.com. Okay, and so for any non-native speakers, Cauldron Pool is not a common name. It's just the title of this URL and website. It's not a person's name. Okay, so let's look at that piece and then have another look at the scale. And I'm going to ask where on the scale you would put that source.
Okay, I'm sorry, Molly. I don't know why. I just saw a Mindy over here on the side. I'm terrible with that. Molly, thank you, Molly. I just launched the poll and we're getting quite a few responses here. Okay, this is interesting. It's very similar. We're getting the same results as we did pretty much with the New York Times. A lot of people are saying 3. So we'll give it like 10 more seconds for a few more people to respond.
So maybe everyone is taking my strategy, which is when you have no idea, you just go with the middle one. It's the safest.
Yeah, I know. That's kind of what I thought. I would like to add one thing that about why people chose certain numbers last time. One person mentioned that that having the whole source, like you were talking about, is important because sometimes you miss things, and if you don't have the whole source, as you were saying, that like even if it's a TV show or something, if you just have a little clip, sometimes you don't know everything that's going on.
Yes.
So it's important to have everything instead of just something you like or just a part of the show. Okay, let's end the poll and I'll share the results.
Yeah, very similar.
I think you're right. A lot of people, we were thinking the same thing because when I saw 3 coming up, I'm like, I think I would do 3 too, just because if I'm not 100% sure. So that's true. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing this and we can discuss now. Thank you.
Okay. Great. So yeah, same thing in terms of you would definitely want to see that article. We don't have time or availability, but I would say let's all click on that website, learn more about it, learn more about that source, learn more about that article before requiring any kind of judgment. But again, for the webinar, we're doing a slightly modified version. Okay, so we have another one. The title of this source is Thailand. The date of publication. So it was last updated on November 17th, 2019. Author or authors, Wikipedia. So it's various authors. Wikipedia, the authors are many, they're unknown, they could be anyone. So this comes from wikipedia.org and the entry is Thailand. So where would you place this source? If you need, I can show you the scale again. Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we have Thailand. Where would you place this source?
Okay, I just launched the poll. This one is interesting. We are coming up with different results, kind of. So in the meantime, after we do this poll, I do have a question. So
okay,
I wanted to ask you.
Your question or from the audience?
It's my question. Well, okay. And one point that someone brought up.
Okay.
Okay.
I love questions.
Someone anticipated my question. I kind of
love
answered, but I thought it would be a good, or I have an opinion. I just wanted to get your opinion on this. Okay, let's see. Maybe like 5 more seconds. I'll let people have an opportunity to vote. Okay. Okay, I'm going to end the poll now and share the results with everyone.
Interesting. Okay. So they've all been fairly similar, but it looks like there's maybe.
With this one, there's a higher percentage is number 1, which kind of brings up my question about Wikipedia, because it is a Wikipedia article. And I mean, I know that if I'm just doing a quick little search and I want some general information, I'll go to Wikipedia. But if I were writing a research paper for a university, I would never use Wikipedia. But I wanted to, that's my opinion, but I wanted to see what you had to say about it. And I can share what some people have said about Wikipedia here on the chat.
Yes, I would.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I would love to hear what they said.
Well, one person said that Wikipedia is not acceptable for academic referencing. So what's your opinion on that? If you have a student comes in with Wikipedia, I mean, you do this thing, but how do you manage that?
So these are great questions. And this is where it depends very heavily on your students. So if I have a primary student, a primary school student in year 1, who has actually told me that they've used Wikipedia to find their information, I am ecstatic. I am very happy that they're making the connection between needing to find something and giving credit to that source. So at the younger levels, certainly, we're just getting the concept of research and citations and academic honesty and integrity. We're just starting with that at the younger levels. Now, when it comes to university level, what I tell my students is that they will find different levels of tolerance for that. But I don't think it's at the university level, if there's researching with Wikipedia, it's not very credible research because of the fact that it can be changed at any time. I do stress that it is a great starting point. It is, if you are required to research something or do something and you have no idea where to begin, or even if you do know but you want some more ideas, it can be a fantastic place. What I call it a launch pad. Okay, so if you're just starting, you can go there, but it launches you off into other areas, and that's where you should be spending your time.
Molly, I have some of the comments, if you don't mind me putting these in here. Many people were actually mirroring what you were saying, like that it's a good survey of information, a good starting point. Launchpad is the word you used. One person actually mentioned Google Scholar as well as a place to look for source or information. So I just thought I'd put that out there because someone put it in the chat box.
Yes, and I'm glad people are offering those contributions. I think Google Scholar is fantastic. And now that it is one of those benefits of technology where we have better and greater and deeper access to scholarly work on the web. I think just a few years ago, there wasn't that availability. And so increasingly we do. And I think it's important, to utilize those resources and to cite from them. And I will, at the very end of this, I will come back to Wikipedia.
Okay, that's great. One thing that people did mention in here, and I don't know if this is something you're going to come back to, but a few people mentioned using the reference list in the Wikipedia article as like the next step. Go to the Wikipedia article, look for their sources, and then go to those references. So
yes, that is a great, I mean, and then again, it's all about critical evaluation. Some of the references in the Wikipedia pages are equally poor or worse. I will also tell you, I know these things very well because I manage the Wikipedia page for the firm that I work for. So first of all, yes, I'm very biased because I need to make it kind of promotional. I need to show all the good things about the firm. But I will also say that because it's kind of a business and it is a firm and it's a money-making organization, the moderators of Wikipedia are very strict about it. And in order to change that page, you need to have special rights and special login to do that. Not anyone can change it. But there are some Wikipedia pages, most of them, that anyone can go in and change at any time. So the fundamental message that I hope everyone comes away with today is that none of these things are simple. This is more than just research. This is deep critical thinking about each and every source, whether it's Wikipedia or the New York Times. If you have a Wikipedia page, even as a professor of English or of research, I don't think that just saying never look at Wikipedia is the answer. I think Wikipedia is great, but we need to know why and when and how we're using it. So I hope that answers some questions. Trisha, was there anything else, any other burning comments or questions about that?
No, the only thing I would add is that one of our participants said that they use teflpedia.com. I don't know what that is, but that is in the chat box if you want to check that out. I haven't, and so I think I will check it out after this to see what it's like, but I wanted to highlight that so people could, but that there are a lot of resources out there. So
there are a lot of resources, and some of them, like Teflpedia, I believe I've been on it, not recently, but some of them, again, it's so important to think critically because it can be geared for and intended for experts in teaching English as a foreign language or as another language. But how do they prove that that's actually who's on there giving advice? How do you know that these people are qualified and have the right credentials? Is it because they put it in their name that's a pseudonym, or is there some other check? So just thinking about that all the time, because when you Google things, it's the same with things like Quora and, like you said, Teflpedia, and there's probably a million other similar resources that can be fantastic resources, but can also very sadly mislead students or any researcher. So it's important to really think about where the source is coming from and who has written it. Anything else, Trisha?
No, I think we're set. We can move on now, I think.
Okay. I will do one more. This is the last source that we're going to vote on. So the title of the source is "In China, 35 plus and female equals unemployable." The date of publication was October 13th, 1998. The author of the text is Elizabeth Rosenthal. We don't know anything about her, but we do know that this piece comes from the New York Times. Okay, so this is all the information that I'm giving you. And here's the scale again. And where would you place this?
Okay, I shared the poll, and this one is coming out a little bit different, just because there's a lot more, after our discussion about the New York Times before, I think, there seems to be a little bit more in the 4 and 5 category. But in just about 30 seconds, 10 seconds, I'll stop the poll and I will share the results. And I will say, there is a comment that I would like to share after I share the results that someone said. So,
I can't wait. It's a cliffhanger.
Yes, I know. Okay, I'll end the poll now and share the results.
Oh.
Yeah, it's pretty standard. Now, one person said that it seemed like a reliable source, but it's outdated. It would be good for historical information, but not current information.
I'm so happy to hear that someone noticed that. Yes, absolutely. So that is a perfect comment to segue into the final part of this webinar. So step 5 is the last step in this process. And once all the arrows are in place, stimulate a class discussion by asking questions and having them, the students, evaluate and reevaluate all the sources. Okay, so in my class, the way that I forgot to mention this at the beginning, but when I have that spectrum, I have it across the biggest wall that I have in my classroom. And I have, again, if I have 20 students in my class, there are 20 arrows on that line, on that scale. And it may look something like this. I have put some of the arrows of the articles that we briefly reviewed here. So we had
Can I ask you a question quickly
Yeah.
before, and this is my own question. So I noticed, and I probably should have asked this a few minutes ago, but before we go too far into this, I wanted to ask you how you have the students put the arrows up there. Do you have them just go in a free-for-all and everybody goes it as a group? Do you have them go one at a time? What is your
great
experience
question
with putting up the arrows?
Great question. So, and I'll talk about this also more at the end, but we're getting close to the end, so I'll talk about it now.
I guess I just anticipate questions.
It depends. So sometimes, if this is an activity that I like to do multiple times in a semester. So maybe on the first day of class, I say, hey, we're going to do this fun activity that's going to get you thinking about research. And you have to bring in an article. And so they bring in the article. And maybe the first time we do it, we do one by one. So the students fill out their arrows and then they kind of present it to the class. And they say, okay, here's my arrow. And this is good to practice a little bit of public speaking too. They say, here's my arrow. This is the title. This is the date. This is all the information. And I might say, okay, where do you think you would put that? And maybe they have an idea. And I say the class can help too. And together with the class, based on the information they have, they kind of all decide where it goes. And then that student sticks on the arrow. And then the next one goes. So certainly it's one by one, but it's collaborative. Sometime later in the semester, if I do this again, then they understand how it works and where everything goes and what they're supposed to do. So I might say, okay, everybody go up and put their arrow. And then the important part is this last part right here. It's this discussion. Because then we're going to be looking at all of the sources, and maybe we see that maybe 2 people have chosen Wikipedia articles, and maybe one of them is near the 1, but maybe another one is near the 4, let's say. And then we look at those 2 and say, well, why is there such a difference? And maybe there is a legitimate reason why they're so spread out. Or maybe we say, oh no, that arrow should move and that one should move, and this one is certainly more authoritative than that article, so we move it around. So in coming back to the slide on your screen now, this is just an example of what maybe ours would look like. Maybe we have Wikipedia somewhere between 1 and 2, the Cauldron Pool article, and then the New York Times article closer to the other end. But let's say, okay, so here I've given you the same information. It's just in a different format. So the first column is gender equality. The second one is about transgender athletes. And the third one is the Wikipedia Thailand page. And I've put them all together so that you can see. I didn't put the other sources just because it was too much text on the screen. But let's say we want to look and compare these. And then maybe we say, it should look more like this. Maybe these 2 are not as reliable, and maybe we need to reevaluate this one. And in class, when you're discussing these, this is why it's important for the students to have their articles, because inevitably, students will say, well, mine's better. I think it should be here. And I say, well, justify why your article is stronger. Why is it more authoritative? And then they can show us the piece and hopefully explain, you know, and move their arrow accordingly. Okay, so I am going to, I suspect there may be some more questions, and I know we're getting somewhat close to the end. So I'm going to talk just briefly about some extension activities. So one thing that I like to do, I am a very competitive person, so I like to have competitions in my classroom. And I have had competitions for the most reliable source. So let's say, again, we're talking about climate change, and let's say the students, they should already know this activity. You should have already done it. And then you can challenge them and say, all right, tomorrow, bring in a new article, and your goal is to have it as close to the right side as possible. It should be the most authoritative. And then, you know, everyone brings in their sources, and the students together can decide which one kind of wins the prize to be the most reliable source that they've found. Another idea that you can do with this is students can do this with their own bibliographic sources at the start or the end of writing a paper. So let's say a university student is writing a research paper and they have 10 sources. Maybe I tell them, maybe not on a wall with a big thing, but maybe they have to kind of number which ones they think are really solid, good sources and which ones are not so much. And I tell students too, it's okay to have a range. Maybe you will have some sources that are not the most authoritative, but you should try to. You should always be striving to have the most authoritative, the sources that you can have the most confidence in. Another thing you can, some of you may have done this before, which is showing the tricks of changing Wikipedia in the middle of class. So I have certainly done this, and I know a lot of professors like to do this. You show students something from Wikipedia, and then you go out in the hall and you change it to something crazy, and then you show it to them again, and they say, what? And it's just further reinforcing how easy it is to change Wikipedia sources, entries. And then finally, this is not confined to written sources. Now, I've typically been using the word articles here, but it could be multimedia, it could be videos. Nowadays, everyone is citing YouTube, Twitter, tweets, anything and everything. So you can certainly expand it to all kinds of types of sources. So that is the activity in a nutshell. Does anyone have any questions or things they would like to discuss or offer as information to other participants?
While we're waiting to see if anyone wants to add anything, we answered all the questions along the way, but I really appreciated that you added that this can be done for all sorts of sources, that it's just not articles, because you're so right that we find so many different types of information that knowing how to evaluate a source is really important. And one point that I wanted to add that someone brought up is they said, you were talking about like for example, the activity to get it the most reliable source. One person brought up about looking at well-known sources, for example, like the Lancet in the medical field, like that as you learn more about what you're actually writing about, it's easier to find the reliable sources in that field because you know more information about it. And then, like it said, the Lancet for that, or if you have, I can't think right now, other ones. Okay, so one question we have coming up is if you have any suggestions for big classes, because sometimes teachers have 40 plus students in the class. And that is something that's very common here in Thailand, that there'll be enormous classes. And that's what we've talked about on other webinars about how to manage that with some of these activities.
That's a fantastic question. So I have been fortunate to have much smaller classes, but if I had a class of more than probably 25, I think it would be unmanageable. I would suggest two things. One is possibly break them into groups. So let's say 4 groups of 10, and they do the same exact activity. And this is about discussion and critical thinking. And if you're one faculty member, it's fairly easy to circulate and watch 4 different groups. If you're lucky to have another adult or another faculty member, great. But I think you can do it with by circulating, because you want the students talking amongst themselves. You want that discussion. You want that engagement. Having the student-centered classroom is really a goal in communicative teaching. Another suggestion is to have students in groups, but perhaps they select one of the articles that they have brought in. So maybe there's a group of 5, and even you can even give them sources. I like it when students have that ownership of bringing in something themselves. But let's say you have groups of 5 and you have an article for each group, and you say, okay, they're acting as one unit. They have to explain and give rationale for that one particular source. So that's how I would manage a large class like that. And maybe others have other ideas that they're willing to share as well.
So we don't have any other questions right now, but I did like your idea about separating them into groups, and also the idea of having them, maybe giving them articles or doing something like that would be a way to manage it. Maybe especially in the beginning, that's fantastic. We don't have any more questions right now. We have gone through all of them as we've gone along, and then we've had one here. So we can move on to whatever you have next.
Great. So I have one reference here. I actually published this activity in TESOL Arabia a while back, which you can also find on my website if you're interested. I wanted to say thank you. If you want any more information about English language programs, there's the website up top. And this is my website, rather rudimentary website, but I like to put all of my resources and publications there. So if you're interested, and if you want this PowerPoint, I'm happy to email it to you if you send me an email. And the most important slide is about the next presenter, which maybe Trisha would like to advertise, but it looks very promising and exciting, and I'm going to join that one. So.
I am really excited for that one too. Well, first, I'd like to have a big thank you to Molly for sharing such great information about how to evaluate sources. I think that was such a on point as far as not only how to teach that, but also for our own knowledge to know how we can evaluate sources, whether it's an article or even on other media that we interact with. So the next one, we are really excited that we're going to hear from Dr. Kevin Colery about critical thinking skills. So we learned some critical thinking skills ideas with Molly here tonight, but Kevin's going to extend that for us, and he's going to have a whole presentation on critical thinking skills. I wouldn't miss it. It's going to be fantastic, but it won't be until January 16th. So everyone can get a chance to recover from the new year and be set. Thank you for everyone that participated. And again, a big thank you to Molly for participating and sharing her time with us so that we could learn. And it's wonderful to have everybody here. So have a great night, everybody, and see you on the 16th. Bye.